he bit me.
Welcome in, everybody, to week number 7 of Indiana High School football. My name is Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports, and we have Casey O'Boyle with Northeast Indiana Game Night with us, and it's rivalry week here in week number 7, and it doesn't get any bigger than Carroll traveling to Homestead. Carroll's only loss of the year is against a Dwenger team that really stymied the offense a little bit. Jeffrey Becker still found a way to throw for over 300 yards in that game, just had a hard time finding the end zone. And Homestead, who lost their first game of the year against Northrop, they were missing a few defensive players in that game, most notably Luke Palmer, who just got an offer to play at Wheaton College, a Division III powerhouse, one of the biggest programs you can find in Division III football. So congratulations to him. That's an outstanding program over there in Wheaton, Illinois, just outside the Chicago suburbs. Casey, this game's going to be fantastic. It's a high-powered offense against one of the best defenses in northern Indiana. But to be honest with you, Homestead's offense has been pretty high-powered as of late as well. Evan Ormsby with back-to-back 300 passing games.
Yeah, we were waiting for that, weren't we, Jeff, from the beginning of the year? Would this offense ever catch up a little bit with the defense? I think we've seen that these last couple of weeks with Ormsby's development. 18 to 23, I believe, last week for 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. Those are Luke Goody numbers. And the one concern for me for this game is their inability to run the ball the way they want to. And Braden Hardwick got dinged up a little bit last week. Coach Chad Zolman told me he's going to play. And but if he's limited at all, that would be a concern of mine if I'm a Homestead backer. But yes, Ormsby with all those athletes out on the perimeter, Jared Chambers. Come here. You're excited, aren't you? Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here, Archie. Come on. Want to come here? My puppy's here, and he's excited about this game. It's rivalry week, Jeff, as you alluded to. All the games are great tonight, but this one in particular is a big one. That passing game with Jared Kistler, Ethan Chambers, Nate Anderson, Gage Sparrow, those 4 weapons right there, I'm not so sure they get the respect that they deserve. And the way Ormsby's been delivering the ball makes Homestead very dangerous. On the other side of the ball, no, come here. Get your bone. On the other side of the ball, you know, it's been well chronicled what Jeff Becker and those Carroll Chargers have been able to do. Mason Englert is running away with the receiving numbers this year as far as being the leader for receptions, yardage, and touchdowns. 14 touchdowns on the season, almost 1,000 yards receiving. Unbelievable how he high points the ball. He goes and gets it like no one else in the area. It's a wonderful matchup, again, of high profile offense against stingy defense. That defense you talked about week 1, missing some key guys. You hope for Homestead's sake, if they were to get knocked off in this game against Carroll, that they wouldn't look back to that week 1 loss where they were missing so many guys, so many starters on that defensive side of the ball against Northrop as being the deciding factor. It may come down to that though, Jeff.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Carroll, they were kind of exposed in that Dwenger game with not having a premier running back to go to. Mason Englert, a lot of pressure going to be on his shoulders. Casey, check this out. This is statewide. Mason Englert ranks number 1, over 200 yards receiving, better than Gannon Howes of Hanover Central. So that is just outstanding right there. But looking at last week's game for Concordia, for Carroll, it was a good performance put in by their running backs, most notably, pull them up right here. Actually, we don't have them in
Lazoff, I think was the name.
Yeah, Max Preps, but yeah, you got Lazoff, and then you also have, because I almost put him on the top 10 players of the week, but yeah, Lazoff averaged 16.2 yards per carry, and of course, Luke Carmody.
Yeah, both those guys, they're going to have a little bit of a running game, I think, to do what they want to do offensively. Homestead's without Graham Colin in the defensive secondary. one of their top back end guys that I think is going to play a factor in tonight's game. Everybody knows about those great linebackers. You mentioned Luke Palmer already. There's Trey Kreiner, Ryan Burton, which is kind of a hybrid safety type player, Cole Etchison, really talented group. The front three does a really nice job of chewing up blocks so those linebackers can run free. They do a lot of, defensive cutting where they'll just throw their bodies into an offensive lineman or two like bowling pins, and then they let those linebackers roam free. But I do worry about that secondary. I mean, it's similar to a couple of weeks ago when Dwenger played Carroll. Dwenger had the much maligned defensive backfield. All the question marks were there, and they rose up. That group of 4 players rose up in that win for the Saints against Carroll. Now it's like Homestead. Okay, everybody knows about the linebackers. Can those DBs rise up and make plays against this prolific passing attack? That's kind of the question. And right now, for me, that's the one area that is still a question mark for Homestead's defense is the secondary.
Looking at Ryan Burton, a breakout game of sorts for him last week against Northside, really getting pressure on the QB, 3 tackles for a loss and 8 total tackles. When you look back at that Carroll Dwenger game, John Michael Fabini, what that Dwenger defense, Sam Pisa coming off the outside edge. It's like you said, Burton is that hybrid type safety linebacker type player. So he brings a lot of speed off the edge. Really keep an eye out on number 29 and that defensive pass rush for Homestead against the great Jeffrey Becker.
Yeah, Ryan Burton is basically a 4-year starter at Homestead. You think about a program that is had as much success as Homestead has, and the size of that school to have a kid start for 4 years is pretty remarkable. And he's a senior. He's a veteran leader, and all these kids, believe me, they want this SAC championship retained, that the victory bell retained out at Homestead's facility. They do not want to relinquish this. And if Carroll would pull off the victory in this contest and Dwenger wins out, Bishop Dwenger will get the victory bell back from the Homestead Spartans. So this is for all the marbles, as they say. This is going to be a great matchup. Homestead has won the last 6 meetings against Carroll. That kind of surprised me. I would have guessed 2 or 3. I didn't know it went back 5 years, and 2 of those years they won twice, once in the playoffs. So 6 straight in this series. I think, but it feels like all the pressure's on Homestead. Don't you think, Jeff?
Boy, I mean, you could say that, but a lot of people wrote them off in week number 1 after that loss against Northrop. But once again, their offense is really starting to find its stride and matching the level that the defense has put in for the last 6 games. You look at Evan Ormsby, 300 yards against Snyder, 294. He's got 10 touchdown passes the last 2 weeks. We knew that the Homestead receiving group is one of the best in the SAC. I think they probably are the best. Northside, obviously, a really good receiving core as well. Mason Engler over there at Carroll. But when you look at Chambers and Anderson and Kistler, these guys are pretty awesome.
It's a dangerous group. We're kind of waiting for it. You look at the numbers, they're very quiet to start with. The 4 interceptions against Concordia, 7-0. That was a game that they were still missing a lot of key guys, and that offense clearly wasn't going just yet. Concordia, of course, was without their starting quarterback in that contest, or they might have started 0-2, Jeff. But yeah, it's a fantastic matchup. Certainly one of the games that I'll be keeping an eye on Friday night. And there's a lot of the players there. Our cover featured, I think, 6 or 7 of the stalwart defenders for the Spartans. That's been carrying the load for sure. But can that defense keep, Carroll in the low to mid 20s? And then I think Homestead can win if Carroll gets into the high 20s, low 30s, mid 30s, let's say 31 to 35. I think the Chargers wind up victorious.
Yeah, and looking at Carroll, I think you're going to have to pass the ball 95% of the time. The quarterback designed runs really didn't work against Bishop Dwenger, but when Jeffrey Becker could just improvise rolling out on passing plays and then take off when he saw a seam, that seems to be when he's at his best. And obviously, Carroll got away from the run against Bishop Dwenger. Lazoff and Carmody really didn't see too many reps in that game.
Totally agree. I think when Becker's at his best, when flush from the pocket, not necessarily on design running plays, open it up. I think Andy Papagiannis opens it up. They throw the ball a ton. And, against Bishop Dwenger, I thought they abandoned the running game too early. Tonight, I'm with you. I think if the weather is going to be beautiful, it's going to be crisp and cold, but still beautiful night for football. I think open it up, throw the ball. I'm not necessarily telling you who I think will win here. This is an old helmet anyway, but I do think it's going to be a fantastic game. And it could be one of those games, Jeff. It comes down to who has the ball last. That last possession of the fourth quarter, I fully expect it to come down to the end, and somebody making a play late in the game, a key turnover, and whoever makes those plays down the stretch will wind up victorious.
Yeah, and if I had to choose, I would go with Homestead playing in front of the home crowd there, limited home crowd, becoming victorious tonight. And that's an old Carroll Supercharger helmet, just like the old San Diego and Los Angeles Chargers. So that's outstanding.
Yeah, I knew you'd like the bolt on the side since you're a Supercharger fan. I noticed that you trimmed your beard up too. I talked to TJ Steele over at Tom Steele Tire, and he wanted me to say something to you. He's like, tell Jeff, I think he likened it to Wolverine before. You had the whole thing going on. He was waiting for the claws to come out. And we had a good laugh the other day, and you trimmed it up. That's a nice thick stash you got going on there, Jeff.
Yeah, before the handlebar was a tribute to Russ Isaacs, one of the best to ever do it here in Fort Wayne.
Without question. Nice tribute. But this is a new look for the folks at Summit City Sports that are tuning in. This looks great.
Well, the next game we want to look at is Bishop Dwengers traveling to Lures, Battle of the Bishops. This is just a fantastic rivalry. Unfortunately, I think Dwengers just got way too much firepower. Casey, they're looking like a state championship team. Saw their game last week against Concordia. KJ Tittman out of the Wildcat. Casey, they ran just about every single offense you could think of, whether it was the wing tee, whether it was the spread, whether it was the I formation. Coach Jason Garrett is giving defensive coordinators all kinds of stuff to think about. KJ Tittman had that big run out of the Wildcat. Rocco Sioka, another big day. Brendan Lytle's fantastic. And that defense, well, Vinny Fiacable picked up a fumble, ran it 66 yards to the house. He's got an interception and a fumble return for a touchdown on the year. I'm thinking this is Dwenger's year to win big over at Lures.
I think so. Sometimes, though, through the years, when you feel like one team is so much better than the other, if you look back through the history, Jeff, sometimes there's some of those scores that surprise you. And perhaps this could be one of those years. Sideline Swami says Bishop Dwenger by 24 points. Believe me, my instincts tell me it's going to be higher. It's going to be closer to 31, 34 points, 35 points, maybe even by halftime. And then maybe the Saints call off the dogs a little bit and Lures score some points in the second half. But I'm with you. I think Dwenger's got a special team right now. What they're doing offensively with their new offensive coordinator, Brody Dixon, I thought last week was just really, really smart. Opening up the playbook, like you said, showing a ton of different formations. If you're a future opponent of the Saints, especially in Class 5A, you've got to prepare for so much now. They went from being the arguably the most predictable offense in the SAC or even in the area to now the most unpredictable. Like you mentioned, that Wildcat offense with KJ Tittman looked fantastic. Opening up the ball with Brendan Lytle, throwing more on first down, non-traditional throwing downs. They ran him late in that game too against Concordia. There were a couple times that I remember I cringed and I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'd be running design quarterback runs with my 3-year starting quarterback in a game that is this lopsided. But by the same token, hey, this is who we are right now. We're opening things up, and the Saints really offensively are clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, and I was joking with Bishop Dwenger, AD, John Bennett, that we haven't even seen the breakout or the emergence of Jack Titman. Every time I click on KJ here, it just keeps on taking us to Jack Titman, the tight end who goes 6'5", 220 pounds. Obviously, he's a huge force for them, blocking and for that running game. And looking at Bishop Lures, they're dynamic. There's no doubt about it. Carson Clark ranks in the top 10 in the state in passing, and that's according to Max Preps. He's one of the top passers, I believe, number 3 in the SAC in passing. But with him and Brody Glenn and Sir Hale is very consistent for them running the ball. So pretty outstanding offense there. I just don't know if they have the size to withstand what Bishop Dwenger is going to bring on Friday.
Yeah, the size, and I think the depth as well. They're hurting right now with some key guys out. There's at least 2 starters on both sides of the ball that if they're not out tonight, they're limited. So that is something to keep an eye on. Brody Glenn got hurt last week on the opening kickoff of the game and didn't play the rest of the game. Will he play in this contest? I think they have to have Brody, because I think he's definitely their top guy in terms of plays in the passing game. But they've got other weapons, and Carson Clark's done a really nice job of distributing the ball. 2 weeks ago, we mentioned how he had 9 different receivers with a catch. That's pretty impressive, especially for a 2A school to have that kind of versatility in their passing game. So I think if they can move some chains early, maybe get a fumble or an interception early just to give their defense some confidence, perhaps they can stick around for a while. I think it's imperative that they come out, swinging and ready for a street fight. They cannot be intimidated by Bishop Dwenger. They got to come out and play physical Bishop Lures football and fly around. Ramon Anderson is coming off an injury. He has not been 100% for the last few weeks, and everything has fallen on Sir Hale's shoulders as far as that running game is concerned. They moved a few different people around in the trenches. And I think some of these guys are going to have to go both ways, and they're not going to be able to have many breaks because Foster Johnson, starting offensive tackle, he's out for at least, 4 to 6 weeks with an injury. This is a very beat up Bishop Lures team that wasn't real deep to begin with, but the Knights can hang around with this because of their skill guys on the offensive side of the ball. And I think just their tradition, their toughness. Can they play Bishop Lures football and compete against a team that everybody in town says they don't have a shot against?
Yeah, looking at Lures, unbelievable what Kyle Lindsey's able to do there. They're sitting at 2-4, but I think some people thought entering this season that they could be more of like the 1-5, what we see with Southside and Wayne. But Bishop Lures, certainly they can bring it on offense. They have a high-powered offense. And looking back at Bishop Dwenger, I really wanted to put Devin Titman back on the top 10 list this week. What he did, you talk about how unpredictable this offense is. He had a passing touchdown last week, Casey, and it was a strike. It was about a 30-yard strike. Not only that, he had a fumble recovery, great defense. He was back about 25 yards there on that pass defended. And a huge shout out to the Dwenger coaching staff. I think they have the most detailed stats week in and week out when we look at all these numbers. And, as a former football player, any individual, any little stat you can get is much appreciated. So I know these players are loving it. But once again, this defense is outstanding, and Devin Titman leads the way. And you really got to like the fact that Titman had, I believe it was 2 carries last week. No, let's say 1 carry for 2 yards. But obviously, if they needed to, they could give him the ball 25 times. He'd run for 150, close to 200 yards with multiple touchdowns. But really like where Dwenger's sitting at right now, heading into week number 7.
Yeah, I concur. This is a offense right now that's sprinkling the ball around to several guys. You mentioned Jack Tittman, been pretty quiet to this point. You're waiting for that breakout game for him in terms of the receiving department. Devin, the halfback pass, there's some that are probably like, okay, why did we show that? Why not save that? But again, to our earlier point, when you show all that, it was basically off just kind of a modified option to the right. Now, if they see something in the game in the future, they might be able to run for a 6, 7, 8 yard pickup when they really need it on the ground, because now the defenders, a future defense needs to be wary of that. And they've got maybe a safety chasing or an outside linebacker that sees something and they're heading downfield, and it opens up running lanes for Devin. He doesn't pass it in the future. So, but it's there in their arsenal. If they notice that people aren't honoring that particular play, they can always come back to it. So I got to show you a prop. Bishop Dwenger is 33-22 all time in this series. It started back in 1965. The all-time leading. I don't know how good you can see that, Jeff. It was a Minnesota Golden Gophers autographed helmet back when my buddy Thomas Hammock was an assistant coach at Minnesota. Thomas got me this. This is one of my many prized possessions that I have here in my cave. Thomas, in 1998, the very first year that we started Northeast Indiana Game Night, rushed for 309 yards against Bishop Dwenger. It was basically, I think it was just a sweep, something to the outside. They just kept running it and running it and running it. The Saints couldn't stop it. He ended up with 309 yards, Jeff, which still stands as the career single game record out at Bishop Luers, which is kind of surprising when you think of all the prolific numbers they put up in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It's mostly been passing. So I wanted to share this. This was in the Battle of the Bishops, and they went on to win that game. I want to say maybe 35-14 or something like that, pretty comfortably.
Yeah, and when I played in this rivalry, Bishop Luers had a player by the name of Jeremy McNeil, and he was arguably the best football player in the SAC with everything that he could do. It was so much fun. And I love that Minnesota helmet. PJ Fleck was here last winter. We need to get PJ back in the fort to recruit some of these players. We've seen outstanding football throughout 6 weeks.
No doubt about it. We say it every week. The talent is amazing. I think the coaching's really good. I'd like to pat ourselves on the back a little bit and say the coverage is pretty good. I think Northeast Indiana is pretty spoiled, but we're pretty spoiled too. So because we enjoy it, the competition is outstanding. You look at the training outside, like traction and places like that, where these kids are developing their skills, and they start at an early age, whether it's CYO or PAL or FIT. They start at an early age now, and it's just a great culture, I think, in Northeast Indiana, where kids now can play a game that they love, dream of playing someday in the NFL, or maybe even in college, and then just be part of it forever, like you and I have been for so long.
Yeah, and to speak to your point, you see a lot of these Northeast Indiana kids in the top 25 of the state in passing, especially when you pull in a Gregory Bull over there at Columbia City, Jakar Williams over at New Haven. So up next on the list, Northrop is traveling to Snyder. So they're not traveling too far. It's going to be on their campus. But I love this Northrop team and the way they battle. Cowan has been fantastic this year. We're going to pull up the rushing leaders in the SAC, and he certainly is that. Demarius Cowan, 1,040 yards through 6 games, averaging 6.4. And that's with everybody knowing that he's the guy. Also, I think the Northrop defense is really, I don't want to say surprised some people, but they've been good, and they make it hard on teams. Bishop Luers had the lead in that game last week, and Northrop came back. I think it was 21 unanswered points to take that victory. So I think they were down 19-14 at one point in the second half. So hats off to Jason Dorfler and Northrop. They got they're at 500 right now, 3-3, and I think this might be the best game of the week in the SAC.
Yeah, it's a great matchup for sure. It's a rivalry game. The stadium shareholding thing doesn't sit real well, I think, with Northrop folks, if they were being honest with themselves, especially when Snyder is quote unquote the home team. And the Snyder people like to call it Snyder Spuller Stadium. So it makes for a fun event when they are the host. I agree. Both teams are 3-3. Northrop, remember last week, like you mentioned, they came back in that third quarter and responded to some adversity, whereas a week earlier against Concordia, they were actually dominating that game up 6-0, and they did not handle adversity well in the third quarter, ended up losing 20-6 to the Cadets. They kind of learned from that in one short week and righted the ship against Bishop Luers. So this is a team maybe right now that's playing with a lot of confidence. The sophomore quarterback, Keone Bates, I think he was kind of thrust into duty when Kareem Freeman went down with an injury, and I think he's done a fantastic job. He's a little bigger, I think, than Freeman, maybe a little more agile and in the pocket especially, and he's thrown some decent balls. The Jadens, I like to call them the Jaden combo. It's Jaden Schmink and Jaden Billingsley. Both are doing some nice things in the receiving game. CJ Davis is still another weapon that I think we don't hear enough about, but he could have a breakout game. This is definitely an offense right now that's starting to click a little bit with Demarius Cowan. In tonight's issue of Game Night, I had a column where I spoke with Demarius about his father, who passed away in 2014. He was murdered in Illinois, and this is a kid that has chosen to use that hardship as fuel. He doesn't look back. He's a forward-looking kid. He wants to play in college, and I think the offers will start coming here soon for him. He's having a fantastic season, leading the area in rushing, as you mentioned, and great young man who just wants to play football and wants to do the right thing, and you can't help but pull for a kid like that. So on the other side, Snyder, they're quietly at 3-3. I think everybody's kind of already thrown some dirt on the Panthers because of some of those 30-point losses. I mean, you lose 3 times in 1 year by 30 points. Something's not right out at Snyder High, but they're starting to get a little bit better, more continuity, I think, in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. And I think this young sophomore quarterback, Luke Halpert, getting a little more comfortable. And then, of course, the player of the week for both Summit City Sports and for Game Night is Tyrese Brown. Had that big monster game last week. They're showing it 217 yards. And on film, he looks big. He just looks like a big, solid bruiser of a running back. I think early on we thought he'd be the guy, and maybe he didn't take the ball and run with it, pun intended, the way Coach Tittman wanted. Well, he did last week in that impressive win for the Panthers out against Wayne, 35-6. I fully expect a heavy dose of Tyrese Brown tonight. There'll be some trickeration for sure by both staffs. I think we'll see a few trick plays that they've both been holding back for this game. And the winner more than likely finishes in the top 5 in a very, very strong SAC this year. The loser probably is relegated to a bottom half finish.
Yeah, I really like Tyrese Brown. Like you said, he's only a junior. He's very big, and he's got good feet. I like how he can make those subtle cuts while still going downfield, still moving forward. Kind of reminds me of LaDainian Tomlinson a little bit, with how, he can make those little cuts to pick up an extra 5 or 6 yards. So Tyrese Brown will definitely be keeping an eye out on him tonight. A great matchup of running backs. Like you said, Luke Halpert was 6 of 11 last week, 47 yards, had the interception. But some guys to really keep an eye out on: Reese Thomas, Isaiah Maxwell, Dominic Moon, those linebackers over there at Snyder going up against Demarius Cowan. He's going to be the focal point. It's just a matter of whether or not you can stop it. Cowan,
Yeah, Moon.
Really, the only team to really slow him down this year is Concordia. And, Concordia right now leads the SAC. They've only given up 78 points all season.
Yeah, I agree. Those linebackers, Moon and Maxwell especially, get a lot of the attention. But it's that front 4 for me. I think with the addition of Ison Robinson, that Snyder front 4 is really good. Reese Thomas is having an all-conference type season at defensive end. When they're able to get in the backfield and wreak havoc against not only a passing attack, but a very talented running back like Demarius Cowan, the Panthers are set up beautifully. But conversely, if Northrop can get 4, 5, 6 yards a pop with Cowan between the tackles, especially I think with their option offense, that's not something that Northrop was really known for, but they've done more and more option offense this year, and it's really been very effective. And certainly Snyder's seen enough of that on film to be prepared for it. It won't sneak up on them like it has maybe a few of the Bruins' previous opponents. But the way they run that, especially with Bates, I think has been real complimentary in their running game to what they want to do with Cowan. Generally speaking, he does not have a lead back, although Jelante Hinton, the freshman who's made a name for himself this year as a defensive end, has been recently inserted into the backfield almost like a hybrid, almost like an H-back, where he's been lead blocking for Cowan. He ended up with some significant yardage last week, a handful of carries. So there's another thing there that has been sprinkled into that Northrop offense. It's a pretty vanilla offense. Everybody knows that. They don't have the skill guys necessarily that some schools in the area have. But I think Coach Dorfler is doing a lot with the personnel that he has, and the addition of Jelante Hinton, the freshman, on the offensive side of the ball, I think is another subplot to keep an eye on tonight.
Absolutely. So expect another good one over there at Spooler. And could this be the year that Northrop takes down Snyder? That's looking beautiful right there, Casey.
I had to bring it up. Yeah, that's a fresh claw right there. They've been filed down just perfectly. The claws have. Coach Dorfler gave me this not too long ago, and I think for sure this is a matchup that Northrop can compete in. I expect this to come down to the last possession or two as well. And I think the Bruins are in good shape to end. I think it's a 22-game winning streak for Snyder in this series. There have been some close ones. There have been plenty of blowouts, but I think the Bruins are primed for a win tonight. This is one of 2 upset specials for the sideline Swami. I think the Bruins get it done, but it's going to be a dogfight till the end.
Yeah, I'm looking at the recent seasons right here, and you go all the way back to 1994, and Snyder's won every single matchup in this series. No, excuse me, they lost to Northrop in 1999.
99.
That was in the sectionals, 24-14.
Yeah, that was kind of the heyday of Northrop football back when I think Matt Stinson was the coach, and they were kind of on an even playing field with the Panthers. If memory serves me correctly, the Northrop had Ronson Underwood at quarterback that year, and I think 98. I don't know if you can flip over to Northrop, Jeff. I think 98 or 99 was the Ben Rogers year. Derek Fry was on that team. That was the team that Northrop, of course, went 12-2, won their only sectional and regional titles. So it was, there it is, 1999. So yeah, that's the last time they lost to Snyder. There you see it in week 3, 2021. I remember I was at both those games, and everybody felt those were the 2 best teams in town that year, and they were, but they avenged that loss and came back and won by 10 against Snyder in the sectional, and then beat a really good Carmel team in the regional, and then of course lost to Penn at the semi-state. Hard to believe, all the history of Northrop football, that's their only sectional championship. Yeah, that kind of surprised me. Again, I look back through the record books and I was like, wow, I thought they had maybe 2 or 3 others, maybe one before then in the 80s. Nope, just one year, 1998, the Ben Rogers led team. And, here we are almost a quarter century later talking about that year, and that's the last time that in 99 that they ended up beating Snyder. Could this be the year that they get that monkey off their back? We're going to find out.
Yeah, I remember the 1995 football season. Northrop had Jermaine Kyles and Chris Ruby, the offensive lineman. 3 running backs all ran for over 1,000 yards that year. They were strong. They were a tough team to go against, especially with those 2 big linemen.
Yeah, John Reed, I believe, was the coach then, and they ran that triple option attack. LaFleur Walker was one of those guys, and they just, yeah, that I remember that. I was actually working at the News Sentinel then, and that team was really hard to defend because you never knew which guy of those three was going to get the pigskin and run over your defensive lineman's face. But a lot of great history there. This is I really like Coach Jason Dorfler a lot. I think he does things the right way. Same thing with Kurt Tittman over at Snyder. I have the utmost respect for both these programs, both coaching staffs. I know you do too. And it's good to see Northrop competitive in this rivalry and against Snyder. So two evenly matched teams that struggle offensively. Defenses are both getting better. It's again, probably will come down to, as cliche as it sounds, turnovers, field position, and a break or two late.
Well, the battle for the totem pole. South Side's traveling to North Side. This was a great game last year. North Side pulling it out late. It's been a tough go for North Side, obviously going through the gauntlet to start this season. They did beat Wayne 49-22, but back-to-back losses against Lures and Homestead. Got to believe Deuce Taylor and the crew are going to rack up some major yardage offensively. Hassan Lambert could go for 150 in this game. Deuce could throw for 350. I'm not sure how much Southside can do offensively. The North Side defense has been struggling lately. LaShawn
That's the
Miller
key.
and the crew, they've been struggling a little bit lately, but I got to believe North Side is going to take this one easily.
I think so. We have the legends winning by 26 in game night. 4-touchdown favorite. I think that's legit. But on the flip side, wouldn't surprise me if Southside hung around. It is a rivalry game. You can throw out the records. They got just annihilated last week out at Carroll, 66-0. Did the Southside Archers, but they've got a few weapons. The one caveat, Jeff, is that, like you alluded to, that Northside defense has just not been that good. They're giving up huge chunks of yardage, lots of points. They're having a hard time getting off the field and getting the ball back to Deuce Taylor. If Southside can run the ball successfully with Matt Morris and Javante Malone and Norfleet Jr., the quarterback, can get a few pass plays, maybe Travis Hapner factors more into the passing game this week at tight end, Southside can hang around in this game, and that's where that emotion kicks in with a rivalry game. Northside's good, but they're not so good at 2-4 that the Southside kids don't believe that they belong in this game. They've won a game this year. They're 1-5. They've hung around against some quality opponents, teams like Snyder and even Bishop Dwenger to a certain degree. I think Southside comes into this game and says, hey, we didn't play well last week. Last week's over. We're playing our biggest rival. Let's go out and compete. They've been playing this game since 1927. And I think Northside has a slight edge in the overall series, but for the most part, it's been pretty even. And kind of like Bishop Dwenger, Bishop Lures through the years, just because somebody on paper looks so much better than the other team, it doesn't always plan out that way. Now, Northside may end up wind up being victorious, but would not shock me at all if Southside hung around in this game and we're getting scores or watching, and it's late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and the Archers are still there.
Isn't it unbelievable when you look at Taylor and Becker, just how close these two are, all the way to the QB rating? 131.5 for Deuce Taylor, 131.3 for Jeff Becker, 23-2, 22-3 as far as touchdowns to interceptions. But, I watched a lot of that Homestead game last week, and there were some drop passes where the receivers didn't help Deuce out too much. And that defense for Homestead is so fast. So Deuce definitely had to crank it up a notch last week, and I felt like he did that. 20 of 31 for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Hassan Lambert ran 7 times for 62 yards with a touchdown, averaging 8.9 yards per carry. It's just one of those things where they got behind big, second and third quarter and had to get away from the run. But I expect Lambert to have another big game. And what a senior year he is putting together. I mean, as far as two-way players go, he might be the best in the SAC. Obviously, Devin Tittman and guys like that are asked to be used as much as well as Hassan Lambert is. But that also speaks to how, his body conditioning and how he's able to take that workload week in, week out and still produce. When you look at MVPs, he's one of those guys you got to take into consideration along with his teammate Deuce Taylor.
I would agree with that. Ronald Collins III there also had a nice game last week, led the team in rushing. Here's another kid that I think they can do a lot of different things with him. Jordan Turner's having a great season. Deuce Taylor's got weapons, make no mistake. That offensive line is getting better, I think, and more confident in their blocking schemes, especially pass blocking. Deuce is pretty good evading pressure, but I feel like it's been better and better and better week after week after week for that Northside offensive line. He's having a fantastic year, as is Becker, as is Brendan Lytle. If you were showing that state list a couple screens ago, the number 3 guy on this list statewide is James Arnold from South Adams. So we have the top 3, statistically speaking, quarterbacks in the entire state right here in our own backyard. It's remarkable. And that's not even including Brendan Lytle, who, I'm sorry, if you're picking an MVP right now of one of those 4, it'd be really hard to leave him off that list because of the kid just wins. He makes winning plays in big time moments. He's got a state title under his belt. We are certainly blessed. There's Carson Clark. You're pointing him out. He's having a fantastic year. And there are others. Evan Ormsby is maybe the most impressive comeback player of the year based on where he started. Greg Bolt, Jakar Williams had a monster game last week for New Haven. So, Brandon Davis missed 2 games. I think by the end of the year, I think Concordia is going to make a run. He's going to have impressive numbers at QB. So it's been a fantastic year with some very, very talented quarterbacks. But make no mistake, it's a team game. You got to have great coaching. You got to have guys that can catch the ball and run with it after they catch it. You got to have an offensive line that gives you time, and you got to have usually a complementary running game. And all these teams and all these QBs have those things.
Yeah, and Southside has a running game, and Matt Morris has been great for them. He wears the number 1 jersey. He's their guy. Trevor Hapner, he's right there with them. So it's going to be a fun one out at Northside. You folks will definitely want to tune in. It's the Summit City Sports game of the week because of that history that you alluded to earlier. That's a lot of games since 1926, you said?
1927 was the first year that these two started playing. That was basically the first year, I believe, of Northside. I think Southside actually started before, like 1923, perhaps. So yeah, it's exciting to think we're coming up on 100 years of football for this rivalry. And it's, talking to the coaches, they will flat out tell you, and neither of them played at either of these schools, right? Coach Mike Brevard came from the Indianapolis area, played at St. Francis. Coach Roosevelt Norfleet was a Northrop grad. But now that they're the head coaches of those 2 programs and they're fully ingrained in the ways at Northside and Southside, this is their game. And for outsiders, especially when you're talking about 1-5 versus 2-4, we can't really relate to it. But the folks that are graduates of those 2 schools and at those 2 schools right now, this is it. This is their bowl game, so to speak. And there'll be a ton of emotion, a lot of energy, and it's going to be a fantastic matchup, maybe closer than all of us feel. We said 26 points. Wouldn't surprise me if it ends up that late, but I fully expect Southside to compete at least for 2.5, 3 quarters.
Yeah, if Northside can hold on to the ball, I think it will be a game like that. But last year, 17-16 was the final score. You're right. There's a lot of emotion in this game, and you're going to see some wild plays that you don't normally see on a Friday night, this Friday at Chambers Field.
Yeah, I think with these rivalry games, these coaches, they like to save a treat or two. I mentioned that for the Snyder and Northrop matchup. I think Dwenger and Lure, same thing. Homestead, Carroll. This is that week. Here we are, right? Week 7. It's rivalry week. All these great matchups. I feel like they've all got a joker card or two up their sleeve that they're going to pull out tonight.
Yeah, and Coach Tim Manigault likes to joke, it's not really a rivalry with Wayne. It just kind of falls on that week. But these two programs right here have outstanding just history and tradition. Brandon Davis looked outstanding last week outside of a couple mishaps. He had the
Yep.
fumble that Fia Cable ran back on the first series of the game for Concordia, drove him right down the field and just kind of coughed it up. Sometimes a little loosey-goosey, if you will, with the football. But other than that, make no mistake about it. He's a serious quarterback. I mean, he can pick you apart. And he was doing that against Bishop Dwenger. It's just those costly turnovers.
Yeah, we talked about it. He had 20 interceptions a year ago. He's cleaned up some of that this year. But those 2 fumbles were costly. And knowing Brandon, he's a great kid. He's a competitor. And I know that kid, he owns that. And he probably knows, man, we were moving the ball against one of the best defenses in the state. And you take those 2 fumbles away, it's a completely different first half. The Saints go up 24-6, and they had that cushion there. The game felt much closer than 24-6. So you got to play a little bit cleaner. Brandon knows that, and I think he will. He's going to, as long as he stays healthy, he's going to lead this offense. Amir Drew was having some success early on running the ball. They've got great weapons. We've talked about them already with Tyler Grossman and Luke Speckard, Scotty Van Lanningham. They definitely have some weapons in their aerial game. An offensive line that I think is getting better and better. Everybody talks about the defense because it's really good, but the offense is slowly catching up. Cam Johnson had a kickoff return last week for a touchdown. I think we need to see more of him on offense. Chase Parnan, another name there in the passing game. He's actually a St. Charles kid that somehow escaped going to Bishop Dwenger, ended up going to Concordia, a really good athlete. He can throw a football too. Don't be surprised if we see maybe a double pass or a reverse pass with him down the road. So this is a team, again, not a lot of depth, but they are really good position by position on both sides of the ball. They need to clean up some things, I think, in their kicking game, but I think that will come. Coach Manigault does a fantastic job. This is a dangerous team in the 3A playoffs as long as they're healthy, Jeff. And then on the other side, Wayne, Coach Sherwood Haydock, I'm sure he's banging his head against the wall a little bit. There's some talent out there. He's just still trying to cultivate things and figure out what he wants to do. He's definitely kind of in playoff mode now. You can tell when you talk to him. He knows that this is all about getting better for the postseason. He thinks he's got a team that can make some noise come sectional time. Defensively, they've really struggled this year. I think a lot of it isn't personnel. It's sometimes just out of position. And I think they're going to keep working on that. It was 14-6 last week against Snyder in the fourth quarter. And then the wheels fell off with, again, turnovers. That's been the bugaboo all year long for this team. If they can hold on to the ball and finish drives, clean up some things on the defensive side of the ball, I think Wayne's going to be just fine. But those are big ifs as we enter week 7, because they've really, really struggled with turnovers, especially fumbles and missed assignments on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you got something there. I really think the kids enjoy playing for Coach Manigault over there at Concordia. I mean, I love the fact that their DBs have so many tackles for a loss on the season. And like you said, Matt Gegline here and Sam Hudson, those two guys fly around. They're big hit machines. They combined for 25 tackles last week against Bishop Dwenger. In 3A, I don't think it gets much better than Concordia, so it's going to be interesting to see how the playoffs shape out. And of course, Coach Sherwood Haydock, his time's going to come at Wayne. There's no doubt about that. And Chris Thomas has been outstanding for him. He certainly is somebody that, he's been able to hang his hat on, averaging 4.9 yards per carry against Snyder. Sean Collins is back, so we'll expect big things from him in this game. and Lamarian Nelson is another guy who's really emerged on the scene for them.
Yeah, he's just a sophomore, and Coach Haydock likes him a lot. He's getting more and more reps. He was dominating so much on the JV landscape that they said, we got to bring him up. And he's factoring more into that ground game now. And Sean Collins is still nursing an injured ankle. And I think that really cost Wayne last week. He was not the same Sean Collins that we've seen earlier in the year. They're going to, I think, use Collins more in the passing game is my hunch for Aiden Meek. This is a quarterback that they need a couple more options. They've got Cameron Tolles out wide. They certainly have Jamari Tab, the big tight end. Earlier in the year, had a nice game. He's been kind of quiet these last few weeks. I think as Sean Collins gets healthier, I mean, they're going to be much better offensively. And I think we're going to see him more in the passing game, and then Nelson and Thomas more in the running game.
Yeah, and I know we've alluded to this before, but when you look at Wayne and Sean Collins, there's not as many. He might be one of the most dynamic players in the SAC, averaging 17.6 yards per reception, and what was it, 10.8, 10.9 yards per carry. He's just electric when he has the ball in his hands.
He is. That injury's really held up their offense these last couple of weeks. I think it ultimately cost them the game 29-28 against Southside 2 weeks ago. Last week, he was pretty ineffective against Snyder. Again, I attribute it to the fact that his ankle's just not fully healed. You're getting to the point of the season. If it's not 100% this week, next week, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept him out. They know right now it's about getting better for the postseason. There is no conversation of an SAC title. There's no top half finish. The teams that they were supposed to beat or could have beaten, they've already played. I mean, they've got Concordia, Homestead, and Carroll to close out the season. Let's face it, it's about preparing for the postseason and getting healthy. And Sean Collins is an electrifying player that if he's 100%, this could be a dangerous, dangerous team that more than likely is going to be 1-8 going into the sectional.
Absolutely. One more game I wanted to kind of chime in on is this one, Columbia City and East Noble. You wrote about it because you know the implications of this game. Not so much for East Noble in the Northeast 8. They're sitting with a 3-3 overall record. They're 1-2 in conference. But like you said in your column here, Casey, this game could make their season. And they got Rowan Zalman back on defense, who's a big-time player for them. I think I don't know if you picked them on your upset watch, but I think East Noble Columbia City is going to be a fantastic game. Yes,
maybe you got to the back page. I don't know if you did or not, but actually we had 2 upset specials this week, did the Swami, and this is the second one. I think, I mean, again, how do you even fathom East Noble losing 4 straight games? So they've won the Northeast 8 4 straight years. They either shared it or won it outright. They never lost back-to-back games under Luke Amstutz in 9 years until a couple weeks ago. Here they've lost 3 in a row. That Leo game that you guys covered was much closer than 24-0.
It was
2 or 3 fumbles, I think, for East Noble made that a different game, different outcome for sure. Columbia City's very good, and they should be favored. They deserve every bit of the attention they're getting. They're 6-0. They've got the wonderful facilities. They have not been the same team on the road, and Coach Brett Fox will tell you that. They got lucky to beat DeKalb a couple weeks ago, a DeKalb team that has been shut down because of COVID and hasn't really played that many games. I think they're 0-3 are the Barons. But East Noble at home, man, this is going to be a fun matchup. Greg Bolt having another tremendous year at quarterback for Columbia City. I think that defense is pretty good. I think Columbia City's defense doesn't get the credit it deserves. But I think if East Noble can run the ball with Justin Marcellus, Dalton Stinson, some play action passes, they need to be better in the passing game. Coach Amstutz told me they just don't, they clean some things up offensively, but they don't have any explosiveness to their offense. Well, that tells me they got in the lab this week and they're going to have a few tricks up their sleeve in terms of maybe a trick play or two, passing game. I fully expect this to be a down to the last minute finish. And I would not pick against East Noble, even if they have lost 3 in a row.
Well, you got East Noble by 1. I'd also like to note you got Carroll by 7 points here. So that's the one that's really hanging out on a limb right there. I got Homestead in that game, but I could be wrong. Carroll played Homestead real tough last year in that sectional championship game. So certainly, I think week number 7 is going to fall in line with the previous 6 weeks. Casey, we're going to see some knockout football. And that Columbia City East Noble game is one to definitely keep an eye out on. That Carroll Homestead game should be fantastic as well. Northrop and Snyder, a good one. You got Northrop by 2. So, yeah.
Battle of Bishops. Yeah, there's a lot of great football. I mean, this is that highlight week for sure. The weather's going to be perfect. It's going to be chilly, but that's okay. We are in October, right? It's going to be. I'm so excited for this weekend. There's a chance I might be heading up to Northern Michigan with some pals. We will have a couple TVs and a few other devices watching all the games, and it's going to be fantastic. It's it's been a tremendous season, and I harken back to the beginning where we didn't even know if it was going to happen. Remember, there was a lot of question marks back in the summer. Would we have a season, or would we have to shut it down? Yes, we've had some cancellations, but everybody's worked together to just get through it. And I hats off to the administrators, the coaches, the players, all the helpers, all the aides that have assisted in this process. We're starting to get more people in the stadiums, starting to feel like football more and more every week. And the play has been, I think, outstanding. It doesn't, even though it's been a strange year, not football wise, Northeast Indiana football has been tremendous. Let's keep it on the train on the tracks and keep going. Week 7 is going to be fantastic. And I'm excited to see how everything shakes out this week.
Yeah, and that's really evident when you look statewide, just how our players are ranking amongst the best in the state. And they're all represented very, very well. So, Casey, enjoy it. Hopefully, even if you're watching from a cabin up north, enjoy week number 7. Should be another exciting one. And wow, we only got 2 more weeks after this of regular season football, and then the real fun begins.
Yeah, it's gone fast. We're about halfway, almost the halfway point to the state finals, right? Thanksgiving weekend. I think there's a lot of great football to be played. I'm excited. It's been a fantastic year, and I expect nothing but more trajectory going week after week. This is going to be another great week.
Yeah, and folks will have to remember Lures will be competing in the 2A, Concordia in 3A, Dwenger in 5A. I think those are 3 real contenders coming out of the SAC.
No doubt about it. And don't forget about South Adams and Eastside and some of these teams, Leo, Columbia City, outside of the SAC bubble. We've got great football here in Northeast Indiana, and we're going to see a lot of teams go far in the playoffs for sure.
Well, folks, that does it for week number 7 preview. My name is Jeff Mahoney. That was Casey O'Boyle. Enjoy your Friday night football. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jeff.